Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Dancing with Damage. I'm your resident philosopher, Ian.
I'm your resident author, Abby. And as promised last episode, I said I would wear the dinosaur tie. No one asked me to, but I felt compelled because Ian said it was rest in peace. So it's fine. Very shiny, full of dinosaurs.
It is an excellent tie. In today's episode, we're going to be figuring out about the seasons of life, and we're going to be talking about what a child is, what an adult is, and it may not be what you think. So we're going to get right into it.
Yeah, stay tuned.
Stay tuned to the current show. So, but just a quick recap, Abby. What conclusion would you say we can draw from our last episode?
So it's all very nuanced, and we know it might be a little fuzzy, but just stick with us. So the meaning of life is to sacrifice the most for the next generation, i.e., show the most love, i.e., do things that are good, like overall good for you, good for the environment, good for other people, which are usually a short-term discomfort, which leads to long-term happiness. Like Ian suggested, opening a food bank, or an example I could give is maybe taking time to tutor somebody who's studying a subject if you're well-versed in it. It could be an hour or so of your time a week, but that could lead to them having more confidence, doing better, having a career, beautiful stuff. So those are pretty good. So Ian, you mentioned children versus adults. I know that's got people's attention. So can you elaborate on that, please?
Yes, of course. So, what, Abby, in your mind, what pops up when someone says a child?
Some of my friends have kids, and I kind of picture sort of a baby to toddler wandering around, smiles on their faces, trying to catch bugs in the field, petting cats, just charming children, childhood stuff,
Yeah, that's like most people would think of that.
Yeah.
And adult. How would you say most people define adult?
For some reason, I don't know why, ever since I was a kid, when people talk about adults, I just picture the photographs you see of old philosophers with their curly white hair and their long beards and their bifocals that are so thick you could use them as building material, reading scrolls for some reason, writing with quills. I don't know why. That's what I picture when people say adult.
Okay. And that's, I'm sure, what most people also think. I'm sure you're in the majority.
You asked. I don't know. I feel like it's important to be honest. Not that anyone asked. Again.
No. Honesty is critical. And you know what? I think we should rewrite. I think we need to rewrite the chapter of the book. I think it's obvious. Really old scroll people.
At least they're not pirates.
Arr.
Arr.
But be they not? You might ask. If you are just tuning in and didn't watch last episode, I have an addiction to pirate speak.
Pretending, using a piratey accent. He loves it. If he starts, he just for days, sometimes weeks.
Yeah.
Arr, be ye needing the ketchup, arr.
Arr. Yar.
Fold ye the laundry, yar.
Arr. The laundry not be having to walk the plank into the water so it gets a good rinse.
A lot of things walk the plank. The thing is, we live next to waters. We have ready access, and there are actually docks that we could use as planks. So technically, it is feasible to command and successfully agree to that command and walk the plank, which makes me nervous. This is too much power.
I think the chicken should walk the plank. I think a chicken walking the plank.
It's cute.
It would be pretty cute. Although hopefully they don't actually jump. But chickens are pretty strange creatures. So you never know what they're going to do. In any event, yes. Okay. So if someone's thinking of an adult, they might think of, I thought, some people might say someone over the age of 18.
What can you give an example, a visual for people at home who aren't special, who have normal brain function? Mm-hmm. Would you like to give them an example of that?
Like a person over the age of 18 might be considered an adult? Well, I don't know how to be more specific. I guess if you attach a stopwatch to a baby, I don't know what I want.
I don't know. Don't you have an image? For example, when people talk about a calendar, everyone in their head, in some capacity, when people talk about months and days and years,
yes,
they have a visualization of that in their head that is unique to them.
Yeah, like I say, slap a stopwatch on a baby. When it hits 18 years, timer goes off. You've got, some people would call that an adult.
So different, but both good instincts.
Anyway, it's nice that those aren't the critical definitions in our book, because clearly we're not on the same page, but it doesn't really matter. We think child and adult, it's important to define these words in a different way. And so we talk a lot about sacrifice, because sacrifice is synonymous with love, and love is the antidote to damage. Damage being sort of the precursor of almost all modern problems in developed first world countries, as we're going to talk about as well. But in terms of the purpose of human life, to sacrifice to the next generation, well, you're probably saying to me, well, Ian, what about a 5-year-old? What about a 5-year-old? What sacrifices are they supposed to make for the next generation? So we did talk about it in the book. Now I talk about that in the book, and the story we use is bears. Hey, Abby.
Bears are awesome. Ian was kind and allowed us to keep the fables very animal focused for the most part.
Mhm.
For I love the animals, as you can probably tell with my prattling about climate change.
That is true. That is true. And animals are good, because all the animals, they kind of have human brains, though. I don't really know how that works. These bears in the story are talking about hibernating. And so one bear says to the other bear, says, oh, I really like hibernating in the winter, because we just get to relax and don't have to worry about anything. Don't have to worry about hunters, don't have to worry about foraging. We just chill.
Just get to nap. That sounds awesome. If you happen to be an adult, or I guess late teen, then you probably relate to the desire to just nap for a long time. Doesn't that sound awesome? No responsibilities, just take a long nap, longer than you think you need. Sounds great.
I mean, I do fondly remember nap time when I was in kindergarten. But yes, certainly as life gets more hectic, the need for nap time seems to increase. So isn't that sad? Isn't that sad? Because when you had all those opportunities to nap, you didn't really need them. Although I think for healthy brain development, young people do need them. So I'm losing myself. To find myself, I must consider.
The second bear.
The second bear says, that is true, friend bear. Probably says something like that. That is true, friend bear. But if we didn't work hard in the spring and the warm season and forage all those berries and stock up all our fat and avoid all the hunters, we wouldn't be able to enjoy hibernation. You can't have one without the other. And in the same way, Abby, how is that, as you wrote it, how does that tie into child and adult?
So I really like this definition and this metaphor. It's one of my favorite in the book. So am I allowed to just say it, or we're building suspense?
I don't. I think this show is well past any sort of structure like that. Why don't you just dive right in?
Awesome. So we talk a lot about sacrifice and love. So you wouldn't expect a young child to have the capacity to undertake to suffer when they themselves are still developing and trying to figure out, what's right and wrong. How does language work? How do bathrooms work? They're scary. There's a lot going on. So we define a child as somebody who is sacrificed for, and an adult is somebody who sacrifices for the child. And I would like you, Ian, to please continue, because there's more to this definition, and I'm very excited about it.
Yes, indeed, there is. We also put some helpful age limitations, I should say, on. Hello, Gray. Gray loves this chapter because he
looks like a bear.
He looks like a bear, and so he's like, when is it time to hibernate? I want to eat all the food while I'm
hibernating. You want to look at the camera? Sure, that was good.
So yeah, let's think of it this way. Let's think of and let's just give some examples. Keep it concrete. So and a sacrifice that someone we call an adult, what kind of sacrifices would we be expecting? Well, we're expecting them to be honest and pay their taxes, for an example. That's a sacrifice, because we want that money to spend on our own happiness, but part of us knows that without taxes there wouldn't be services like schools,
healthcare in Canada,
healthcare and all that sort of stuff. Also,
you avoid jail or paying tremendous fines if you just pay your taxes. So that's on the other side very positive. That's right. So there is, but that's a sacrifice. I mean, we expect adults to get up every day and go to work, which is a sacrifice, because there are ways to avoid doing that.
We all know that there are ways to avoid doing that, or to not work honestly and so forth. But the expectation is, if you're an adult, you're going to work, and you're doing that very often for the benefit of very young people. So if you have your own children, you're doing it to pay for their well-being. If you don't have kids, it's still to support a network or the social services that, again, mainly that vulnerable population is taking advantage of. And so we mainly, when does society place expectations that someone is making sacrifices more than receiving them, making sacrifices for society rather than receiving them? We say about 25 years old, Abby?
Yes, because while 18 is legal and adult, and I think that's wonderful, and everyone should immediately use their right to vote as soon as they hit 18, we recognize that when you're 18, you are still a teenager and you still have a lot of experience you need to undergo to sort of start your path to adulthood. You figure out, okay, what am I doing after high school? What are my goals in life? Am I going to start saving up money? What does my living situation look like? So there's a lot of growing still to do where you need to spend that time on yourself. So we think by approximately 25, that's a point in your life where likely you would have figured out at least some of those things.
That's right. And we kind of instinctively understand this concept of sacrificing for children more, because let's say there was a burning building, and let's say someone could only carry out either a toddler or, a 50-year. Even though they're both humans and they're both important, most of society would expect that the person, if they can only take one, takes the toddler. Now, why do we feel that way? Well, it's, again, because that's the demographic we expect. We expect that 50-year-old to understand the sacrifice, and we expect the toddler to receive that sacrifice. So anyway, so the brain kind of stops sort of developing at 25 years old. There's some gray area there.
Bad
If you will permit me saying so.
Ugh.
Some gray area. But we picked 25. In this day and age, because there's so much schooling and dependence on our parents as the cost of living goes up. In age in developed first world countries, 25 years old, though, you're sort of expected to start making your own way in the world, to start giving back to society. And then that kind of ends around 75, let's say, because people are retiring later and later. And as we find out more treatments for things like, or more preventions for things like dementia and Alzheimer's, and life expectancy is going up and everything like that, we sort of argue that 75, it's a nice round number. If you're, that's up to 75, you're still expected to sort of be making sacrifices for society. Mm-hmm. So 0 to 25, you're more or less receiving sacrifices. You're sort of receiving tax dollars. 25 to 75, you're sort of creating tax dollars, is an easy way to think of it. And then 75 to, let's say, 100, hypothetical 100-year-old lifespan, you would again be receiving sacrifices because you'd be getting kind of old.
Well, physically, as your body ages, it just can't, even if you're in excellent shape, there's limitations to what a body can do. And it's unreasonable to expect somebody like in their mid to late 70s or even early 70s, depending, to continue to put the burden on themselves. They've lived, hopefully, a very good life. They've sacrificed for others for several years, 50 years. We did a 50-year span of being an adult.
Yeah.
And it makes sense that they should reap those rewards. And in a lot of cultures internationally, Ian, the elderly are revered as the wisest and the most cherished in society because they have that experience, and they're often sought after for advice, right?
For sure. And again, an easy way to test this sort of social truth is, let's paint that hypothetical scenario of a burning building again. Let's say there was a toddler and a 50-year-old inside getting cooked. Unfortunately, it's hot. But look, I didn't make up fires. They're dangerous.
Why are all of our examples so dark?
It's, actually, this one's not dark because fire provides a lot of light. So if there was let's say a 30-year-old and an 85-year-old standing outside the building, let's say they're in equal physical capabilities, okay? Still, whom would you expect to, if there's only one could rush in and try and save somebody, we would expect the 30-year-old to do it. So that is because as a society, we sort of feel that anyone between the age of 25 to 75, these are the ones who have to take risks, suffer, and make sacrifices. And again, we argue that that sacrifice actually brings fundamental happiness to the person, but we still expect them at that age group. So going back to the bears and the seasons, we argue that you have two childhoods, one when you're 0 to 25 and one when you're 75 to 100. Hey, Abby, so that would be like in the seasons, that would be like
The hibernation period, where you get to reap the rewards of having people care for you. And one example I kind of like to sort of visualize it is if you ever met a new parent, especially mothers, when they're with their new baby, young babies need to eat and relieve themselves frequently, like every couple hours. So you can't sleep 8 hours when you have a newborn because they need to be fed every few hours because they're growing so rapidly. They could get sick or worse if they're not fed. So this is, I would argue, one of the most stressful times of having a human under your care because they need to be, helped the most frequently. It's like if you have, on a lesser extent, a new puppy, when they're being house trained, they need to go out every couple hours while they're still understanding outside is the best place before you can have them inside longer hours. But if you have someone who is a new baby, they seem, for the most part, tired but happy. Their love to do this thing, to care for their child. And that's sort of, I think, a beautiful visual example of an adult being willing to sacrifice and getting fundamental happiness out of it, because a parent knows that they're doing this for someone they love. And even though it's hard and it's sacrifice, they're getting the fundamental joy from knowing that they're helping their child be healthy and strong and develop and turn into, hopefully one day, an amazing adult who can have a great life. Hey, Ian.
for sure.
Yeah.
So the seasons of life are a winter time, like bookends on a bookshelf. A winter time at the beginning of life, 0 to 25, receiving sacrifices, receiving love from society, from parent figures, guardians. 25 to 75, season of summer, where there's work to be done in order to get ready for that other season. And then 75 to 100, again, a winter time where sacrifice is being sort of burnt.
And just another quick analogy, because it's very beautiful. So I grew up in a farming community, and summer was sort of the time where you have to work the hardest because that's the only time you can grow food to keep you through the winter. And the younger you are, the less you are expected to help with those kinds of chores. But as you get older, growing up, the threshold to help was pretty young, definitely younger than 25, definitely younger than 10, but the expectations were much lower. So I think that's kind of a fun visual example there.
Yeah, and I mean, and we, if a young person's getting a good education, they're still being introduced to the concept of sacrifice. Like, for example, in kindergarten, the teacher may say to a pupil, well, you have to share that toy with other people. Well, the child is learning about sacrifice, doing things for others instead of themselves. Well, I don't want to share this. Let's say it's a dinosaur.
Ooh.
A real life dinosaur. No, maybe not.
I wouldn't want to share that either.
Yeah, let's keep that out of schools. Tyrannosaurus, flesh-eating creatures. No, it's a dinosaur toy. And so the young person wants to keep that dinosaur toy and have it, but they're having to learn about sharing so that other people can be happy too. And so we try and introduce that, but it's really not expected. But what's important about this is actually we can refine our definition of the purpose of life. Before, we talked about how evolution showed us that it was to make the most sacrifice for the next generation or to show the most love for the next generation. When in fact, when we dig deeper, it's to show the most love for the next generation in adulthood. Now, why is this important? You're saying, Ian, Abby, why is this important? Well, we talked about damage, and that damage produces selfish behavior, which is the opposite of love. It is the antithesis of the purpose of life, unfortunately, and it's getting very prominent, causing a lot of fundamental unhappiness. But it means that you can only really truly detect damaged behavior in people between the ages of 25 and 75, Abby?
That's true. So to sort of summarize that a little bit, we're saying the purpose of life is to sacrifice and show love to get happiness for yourself. But as damage becomes more and more saturated in people and it's compounded and no one's able to sort of cut back on the damage, which you can do, can't stress that enough, by receiving and showing true love to other people, you do cut down on your own damage and you cut down on their damage. It's beautiful. But as you compound the damage, sometimes people are so critically inundated with damage in themselves that they can't sacrifice. They don't have the capacity to sacrifice. And then what happens, Ian?
Well, then they remain a child sort of their whole lives by our definition, even though they become able to vote and they become sort of sexually mature. By our definition, they're still children, someone who lives their whole life as a burden because of damage, and for no other reason than because of damage, by sabotaging their own lives and becoming sort of more of a net burden in society than sort of someone who can sacrifice for others. And it's unfortunate because that's a very sad way for society to be. And it's sad for the person because they live in a perpetual winter throughout their whole lives, truly being fundamentally unhappy because not having access to the purpose of life, which is, again, to make those sacrifices at the relevant times. So we really, and we don't ever blame people because there are people that unfortunately go through life not living the days as sunnily as possible. And that's what our book is about and the philosophy is about, is to be able to make the sun shine brightly in the lives of people so that they can be fundamentally happy and fulfill the purpose of life.
Yes, we cannot stress enough. We've said this in the past. We'll say it probably 100 more times before, I don't know, the show
1
ends.
million times.
Yes.
What are we going to say?
Damage is not your fault. It is something that is done to you, and often not always through others' fault either. We'll get into that. We will get into that. We'll do a deep dive in a future episode about how damage comes to be. Again, it's the staircase. We got to go one step at a time. We got to work. We did come up with a structure that makes sense. Ian?
Hey, Abby. We did, and that's why we encourage you pick up the Social Blueprint. As we've said before, we're trying not to profit from it. The profit margins.
It was set to, I checked. So it was the lowest we were allowed to set the profit margins to. That there was a meter. So we could make up to 14 cents royalty if someone buys, I think, the hardcover. And I think like 8 cents if you buy the Kindle or the ebook version. So we have set it to as low as physically possible, and we would have to sell a lot of these books before we made any kind of significant financial impact.
That is not our goal.
It's not our goal. Our goal is hopefully to get to a point where we can help more people hear this message and hopefully help people improve their lives. Ian?
Yeah, big time. Because again, we've talked about this, but when you turn on the news and you look at the way society's headed, we really all think in our hearts, or many of us do, sir, why is the leading this way? And why can't people just get it together and societies get it together and help each other and be better? Why do things always have to be spiraling everywhere we turn? So that's our goal, is to pump the brakes and get the train going in the right direction.
That's exactly right. So damage is not your fault. Children are people who are sacrificed for. Usually we hope they're between the ages of birth and 25 and then 75 to however long they're able to be on this earth. And sometimes the amount of damage you hold is so great, it stops you from being able to sacrifice at all, which makes you fundamentally unhappy. We'll get into that. So anything else you want to say, final words?
Just to make it, if it wasn't very clear, there are obviously people born with sort of physical disabilities or mental disabilities that are unrelated to damage. We do have to distinguish between damage as a reaction to certain traumas, and we're going to talk about that, versus or a more conventional disability, you might call them. And of course, that group is certainly not what we're talking about here. There's no talk of expectations for sacrifice between certain ages. If there's a medical issue, that would be odd.
Yeah, and I find and it's nuanced as well, and it's up for debate. But I think a lot of people who, for medical reasons or biological reasons, are unable to sacrifice, they can still show love in different ways. It's not that they have to sacrifice, but sometimes if all you are able to do is spend time with someone, share a smile, share a laugh, have moments of joy, little moments of joy, if that is the most that can be done, that is sufficient. Sort of, it's tailored to your capacity. If you have the capacity to make great sacrifice physically, mentally, emotionally, and you're not doing that, that makes you feel fundamentally unhappy. If you are doing the most you can with what you are able to do, then there is nothing stopping you from feeling happiness because you're doing the most. You are being your best self every day. So we're talking about people who are not meeting their full potential.
Yeah, and the analogy would be, let's say, we've all got a field, like a farmer's field, to plow in our lives, and for whatever reason, the field that some people are given to plow is smaller, but if they make full use of it and all that good produce goes and feeds people, well, that's just great. We're talking about people who were given a large plot of land and have all these great crops and then burn 90% of them, and then there's only 10% crops, of the crop to give people. We're talking about lives that have significant self-sabotage, creating a sacrifice deficit between the ages of 25 and 75. And that's what we're seeing very commonly in humanity now. And that's what we're going to address. So sorry, that was a long-winded way of saying that was my last comment.
Yeah. So basically, you sort of know within yourself what you think you are capable of doing. And again, if there's a medical reason that you are unable to do more, if that's your best and your most, and you're just trying to be your best self, that is sufficient. This is specifically if you are capable of more and it's damage that's stopping you from doing the more. That is when you will feel sadness and lack the fulfillment in life that you're seeking. And it results in things like, wanting to online shop to fill a void, which we'll get into. Anyway, so I think that is our summary for today. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you have a great day.
Seasons of life.